everyone! Welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing well, and welcome back to another segment of Halloween month, where I discuss some of the spooky moments in certain TV shows, or discussing about certain villains. Whatever you want to pick, but it's a nice time for thrills and chills. And today I'm going back to, once again, the Owl House. I know that it's a bit late, but I thought of introducing this during the time of Halloween because some of these scenes in the Owl House were pretty scary. After all, this show was originally supposed to be a dark comedy, horror, as well as fantasy. So, without further ado, I'm going to introduce some of the top 10 most intense and scary moments of all time in the Owl House. And bear in mind, if you haven't seen all 3 seasons of this show, I'd recommend you do so through Disney Plus or whatever you get access to. So here we go. Top 10 scariest moments in the Owl House. And on the account that it's Halloween and all, Espionage Persona. Ta-da! The Owl Beast was practically a prelude to what we were going to expect in the Owl House. And it was not just called the Owl House just for the sake of it. Of course, many of you had heard me talk about this multiple times, but of course, the owl was introduced in the dark and stormy night, which is usually the stereotype when it comes to the introduction of horror. So Luz tries, of course, to get some magic from the elixir that Ida relies on, unbeknownst to both her and King, that they unwittingly brought in a literal monster to their house. After some detective work, the two soon realized that the monster that's been chasing them was Ida all this time. So of course, the concept of the curse and the fact that Ida has to drink this stuff before taking the form of the owl beast, almost like a werewolf deal. So you can understand that Luz is kind of in a very dangerous situation, which is why I put in number 10, because if those elixirs were failing to work, then Ida would be able to turn into an owl beast without warning, and there wouldn't be a whole lot of time for Luz and King to protect themselves if it went out of control. Which is why the intro definitely gave it a very scary moment, because it showed some of the risks and dangers that Luz and King had to take and when they are living with Ida. So, what could be worse than a curse that turns you into an owl-based monster if you don't drink a certain elixir, as well as running the risk of losing a certain body part in the process? Well, how about being turned to stone for thousands of years or till the end of time? The petrification process is the death penalty in the Owl House. That's right. Once those guys are turned to stone, it's lights out for good. Which, of course, heightened the stakes in Season 1 when we saw the consequences that came with it, and the desperation that led to Ida. And, of course, in Season 2, it gets even scarier as we saw Luz slowly being turned to stone, trying her best to stall for time and finding a way to beat Belos at his own game. And boy, was she lucky to be someone who can feed his ego. Rest assured, the collector will be mentioned again later on in this list, but for now, the introduction alone definitely gives a lot of people the creeps, especially when you come across the collector in the Hollow Mind episode, the one thing that drove everyone off the wall was the introduction that came later on when the collector was officially out. And there are a lot of million one reasons why you would have to fear the collector just by one scene alone. Holy cow! Not even for 1 millisecond, and the collector totaled Belos into a big pile of goo. No wonder we actually have to be scared of this guy. Yeah, like, while it has a very childlike presence, the collector definitely is that one omnipotent creation that definitely made us want to say, oh god, we are screwed. In Season 2, we find ourselves falling in love with Hunter with each passing episode, and more about his character developing over time. And plus, we feel bad for him when he finally learns the truth of his origins and who he really is. And of course, his identity crisis. And on top of that, he is banished into the human world alongside with the Hex Squad and Luz. He now has to deal with some of the aftermath of what he had just witnessed earlier. But on top of that unfortunate epiphany of pain, he finds himself facing Belos once again in the most horrific horror movie style way possible. That is right. Possession. And oh my lord, one of the reasons why I put it on this list is not only Hunter facing what he fears most in the most literal sense of getting this guy out of his head, but also just representing more about Belos' power, even when he was nothing more than a big blob of goo. He was able to possess several animals during his time, and on top of that, perfected it up to the point where he could possess Hunter. Not only is this so terrifying in terms of story plot, as well as establishing Belos being a literal monster at this point, but you also find ourselves with fearing for Hunter's life, as well as the capability if Hunter was going to live through this till the end of Season 3. Disturbing, but the more you watch this guy, the more uncomfortable you feel around him, and understandably so. Even when he was first introduced, this moment I felt like really states just how terrifying it really is, and just the start of a nightmare. When you learn about the talisman being a living, breathing creature, even if it just turns into an inanimate object the moment it's being used by the witch, well, it definitely makes the whole concept of it horrifying, especially when it goes further down the line, and unfortunately, what almost happened to Clapton. I put it further on the list because this is tame for Disney, to say the least. But the other stuff that's going to happen later on in this list are way worse and nightmarish, to say the least. But just the conception of the talisman, just the idea of your Belos eating another creature that is still alive, even when it was ripped off with its own staff, it just shows the more grisly capabilities that the Owl House had to offer. Make no mistake, Gus may be young, but he's insanely good with illusion magic. He utilizes it in more ways than one. And apparently, it began to take on a more disturbing turn when he he goes to the Looking Glass ruins and tries to get back at Bree and her Glandis posse after they tricked him into going into the Looking Glass ruins to steal the stones from the tombs of the previous illusionists. And of course, this is also where the horror genre kind of comes into play. And this is Disney who try their best to be as tame as possible, like, for example, the Black Cauldron and such. But in this case, Gus really showed of what he can do with his magic, turning all these statues into facing Bree, bleeding out in practically what you would see in the most horror films anyway, especially when it comes to ghosts, resulting in her in fleeing in fear. I think if we were in her position, I'd say we'd do the same thing. Again, Hollow Mind was the episode that broke the entire fandom for more than one reason. Aside from the moments that made us cry our eyes out, we've also had this whole episode practically freaking us out till no end. From the suspenseful moments and close calls, we were learning little by little the secrets that Emperor Belos held in his mind for years. Even the atmosphere of his mindscape is just absolutely terrifying. It definitely reflected of who he was as this awful, twisted human being, hell-bent on trying to destroy both demon and witches that have done no wrong to him. And on top of that, we definitely learned some of the disturbing secrets of how he was able to get to control everyone at that point, as well as being horrified on Luz's behalf when she learns that she unwittingly helped this guy succeed in some of his plans. To make matters worse, it was even horrifying to see Hunter being sunk into his subconscious as a prisoner, being once again close to having a final victim for the Golden Guard. I know this moment should have been included along with the collector, but I felt like since it was so disturbing on all levels, I thought of putting it further up on this list and tried to separate it on its own. Anyway, the collector definitely takes on a more terrifying turn in watching and dreaming in terms of their capabilities. I mean, sure, the puppet thing was pretty scary, but considering that this is an immortal kid that was able to warp the reality around them like that, and on top of that, you have Luz, King, and Ida reliving their traumas and their worst nightmares into one frickin' bundle. It was amazing that Luz was able to cool herself down long enough to realize that what was happening was just mere illusion. Even if that wasn't the case, it still didn't change the fact that this showed a bigger portion of the collector's power and just how dangerous they truly are. I mean, if they were able to trick Luz, King, and Ida in reliving those sorts of fears and memories, can you imagine if that was applied in real life? That would rival that of Freddy Krueger alone. Just when you thought the owl form that Ida takes when her curse kicks in was bad enough, check out Emperor Belos' form.
You'll never make it out of here unless you stop the draining spell right now. I said stop it.
Yeah, you could definitely really say, like, the silhouette alone gave you a hint of what was going on. But when you see Bellows in his full-on monstrous form, you know how much this situation was screwed for Luz. It was agile and quick, and on top of that, gave off a similar vibe to that of a Lich King from Adventure Time. Energy draining and practically more flexible, considering the fact that his goo could actually take on several different forms, to say the least. Especially this scene. Yeah, I wouldn't be too surprised for the next couple of nights when Hunter had that stuck in his brain. Aside from that, I felt like it also was a good reflection of Bellows' character. As Luz had stated before, Bellows really was a hypocrite, claiming that he wants to protect another fellow human, but his actions had made him less and less human over time. Every person he's killed, every remorseless act, resulted in him practically fading away into nothing, feeding on talisman just so he could survive. You could definitely say that this form that he takes definitely reflects of who he is, a slimy and unfeeling person who'll do just about anything to get what he wants, which is probably why it makes him such an effective Disney villain in our modern age. But this is nothing compared to the number one most scariest moment that we've ever witnessed in Owl House history.
It's the last of many, but it still beats. It's the Titan's heart!
This was probably the most terrifying moment in the history of the Owl House, for a very good reason. This was where Bellows was almost close to succeeding in his ultimate game plan, wanting to eradicate all of the Boiling Isles because it was considered a scourge among the fellow human race, practically something that should be destroyed on sight, no questions asked, due to his mentality that he grew up with in the 14th century. And on top of that, you see the land just decaying, be absorbed into him, practically whittling away into nothing. Even when Rain tried their best to actually take down Bellows before he could get to the heart of a Titan, it was to no avail, and Bellows began to take on the corpse of the Titan, King's father, and thus wreaking havoc. Even his ultimate form that he takes definitely reiterates of just how screwed everyone is. It just felt that hopelessness, that it was game over for everyone. Bellows was winning by a long shot, absorbing once again every living thing, tearing it apart whatever means necessary. This definitely was one hell of a scene that reflected of just how much of a villain Bellows is. How much that no matter how big the obstacle is, he'll still try to achieve his goals, no matter if it costs the physical form of his body and whatever shred of humanity he had left. Thus resulting in one of the scariest moments in the Owl House. So these are just my thoughts, and I'd like to hear yours. What moment in the Owl House left you feeling terrified with nightmares? Do a comment, subscribe, and like that button. So this is Dragon Videos signing off, and stay tuned for some videos for Halloween.